Taurus calendar of the covenant, and it's according to the covenant calendar logo. We're also going to be looking at this symbol right here, pi, and how is that connected to the calendar of the covenant, and will there be something about a key of knowledge? So just have fun with this, and we hope that you enjoy it. What does the covenant calendar logo have to do with pi? And what is pi? Well, it's the 16th letter of the Greek alphabet. Some people know that. But this is a little bit more what pi is. Pi is commonly defined as the ratio of a circle's circumference, as a capital letter C, to its diameter, which is a small letter d. The ratio is constant, regardless of the circle's size. For example, if a circle has twice the diameter of another circle, it will also have twice the circumference, preserving the ratio. And most of us learned that in school a long time ago. In November 2016, a world record of pi was successfully computed to 22.4 trillion digits of pi. There is not one repeating pattern. That's important. I want you to remember that. Not one repeating pattern. It goes on forever, representing eternity. Has this divine number, which is approximately 22 divided by 7, has it been incorporated in the circuit of the sun through the Mazzaroth every year? What do you think? Remember that pi is approximately 22 divided by 7. Covenant calendar logo looks like this. And we're just wondering, is it possible to teach some very basic important concepts about Torah's calendar of the covenant with this logo? Well, let's look at some scriptural definitions for the Hebrew words of Tequfah and teshuva. We'll do them in that order. And what does that have to do with pi? Let's start with Tequfah. What is the Tequfah? This is the sun's circuit through the Mazzaroth, or through those 12 constellations in 1 year. Every single year, the sun makes this circuit perfectly. We can read that in Psalms 19:6. Its rising, that's the sun's rising, is from one end of heaven and its circuit to the other end. The sun's rising is from one end of heaven and its circuit is to the other end. Now, what is a teshuva? It's a little bit different than the Tequfah. The answer is it's a turning. Lots of us know that a teshuva is when we turn our lives around and we go the other direction to follow Yeshua. Well, when it comes to calendar, it's also a turning. Twice in every yearly Tequfah circuit, the sun turns. It turns when it gets to the autumn equinox. You'll see it makes half of its trip, and then it turns and it goes all the way back until it gets to the time of the spring equinox. The spring teshuva will have a straight line shadow, and when you see that shadow in the spring and in the northern hemisphere, that will be on the last day of the Tequfah circuit, the very last day. It's all marked in the heavens. So we're going to look at 2 different parts for the covenant calendar logo. The first part is going to look at this outside rim of this logo, the outside rim. On the covenant calendar logo, this outside ring represents the sun's complete 360-degree circuit through the Mazzaroth every single year. We read in Job 38, verses 32 to 33, can you bring out Mazzaroth in its season? Season, is that the day season or the night season? The Mazzaroth comes out in the night season, doesn't it? Can you bring out the Mazzaroth in its night season? Do you know the ordinances of the heavens? the mandates of the heavens? Can you set their dominion over the earth? These lights have a mandate, and this circuit does too. And it's perfect every single year, the sun's circuit through the Mazareth. This logo marks out the spring and the fall teshuva equinox times. It marks out the turning of winter when it turns to spring, and it marks out the turning of summer when it starts to turn to the winter. The logo also marks out the summer and the winter solstices. And that's what we have every single year as the sun travels through the circuit in the Mazzaroth. But the scriptures speak of 2 seasons, seeding time and harvest. But we are familiar with 4 seasons. We're familiar with spring, summer, autumn, and winter. And those are marked on the outside ring of the covenant calendar logo. Every single year, the sun begins its new circuit the day after the spring equinox or the spring teshuva. So the teshuva is the day that if you're marking your shadow on the ground, you'll see a straight line, and the shadow will be a straight line, and the very next day, the sun begins its circuit all over again. You know what? There's no intercalation needed in this calendar, not ever. It's perfect every single year. And that assures that the 14-day count to Passover will never fluctuate. It's always exactly where it needs to be. No intercalation, you might ask? No intercalation. And we have to say, wow, that's amazing, because every other calendar that we have seen that wants to be a true calendar has intercalation somewhere in their calendar to keep things straight. Okay, we have finished the first part of our logo part 1 on that outside ring. So let's turn to the logo part 2. And we're going to look at this inside section. And this inside section represents the mandate of the sun and the stars every single day. This daily cycle is approximately 24 hours. What are the 2 seasons in a cycle? There's 2 seasons represented here, the day season and the night season. And where do we read about that? It's in Jeremiah 33:20. Saith Yahuwah, if you can break my covenant of the day and my covenant of the night, that there should not be day and night in their season. That's the beginning of it. Yahusha says, if you can break it, there's something else going on as well. But he calls it a covenant of the day and the covenant of the night. And these covenants were given on the first day of creation. Did Jeremiah say anything about the moon being in charge of dividing the day and the night? Did he say anything about the moon being in covenant with this day season and night season? The answer is no. And no other prophet said anything about that moon being in covenant with the day season and night season either. How are these 2 seasons governed? What governs them? Well, we're back to Jeremiah 31:35. You'll want to mark this down. Thus saith Yahuwah, which giveth the sun for a light by day. That would be the day season. And the stars for a light by night. That would be the night season. There's some other interesting information in this verse as well. It says he gives the ordinances of the moon, which divides the sea when the waves thereof roar. You have to read that verse in a very special way. So the sun is given for the day season. It divides the day season. And the stars are the ones that divide the night season. Jeremiah talks about 2 lights that govern 2 seasons. The moon, he says, divides the sea with waves, not the stars. Therefore, the moon does not divide the day and the night seasons, but the moon is given ordinances to divide another type of season, And what would that be? Well, we're told about that as well. The moon does have an important mandate. It divides the agricultural seasons. The agricultural seasons, the Moedim, there are agricultural Moedim. In Deuteronomy 33, 13 to 14, this is the Torah verse. And of Joseph he said, Blessed of Yahuwah is Joseph's land, for the precious things of heaven, for the dew, and for the deep that coucheth beneath. Verse 14, also for the precious fruits brought forth by the sun, and for the precious things put forth by the moon. What are these things put forth by the moon? It's the precious fruits that came about with its governing the agricultural seasons along with the sun. This is only one of the moon's ordinances. There are many of them. We're just talking about one right now. There are two great lights from day 4. In Genesis 1, we're going to read verses 14, 16, and 18. And Elohim said, Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven, and these lights are to divide the day from the night. And the lights also do something else. Let them be for signs, for seasons, and that's including agricultural seasons. The sun has something to do with that. And for days and for years. There's nothing in there about months. And Elohim made 2 great lights. The greater light to rule the day, that's the sun. We read that in Jeremiah 31:35. And the lesser light to rule the whole night. And he made the stars. The stars, there's other stars besides the Mazzaroth. This lesser light is the one great Mazzaroth light. One. And then there's some other stars. And what do? These 2 lights to rule over the day, the sun, and over the whole night, the stars. And what else do? They divide the light from the darkness. And Elohim saw that it was good. Now we have a really important comment down here in the lower right box. When the moon is seen in the day sky, about 25 days of the month, you know it definitely is not dividing the day season from the night season. Start watching that moon. It's in the day sky at least 25 days of the month. It cannot divide. But there's more about the day season. Sunrise and sunset are not the determining factors that divide the day season from the night season. There's something else going on. Each cycle has 2 twilights. Both are a mixture of light and darkness. The morning boker mixing occurs before sunrise, and the evening erev mixing occurs after sunset. Well, I think we should chart this on the logo. How will this look? Well, right here at this key, you will find the first dawn light of morning. We call that boker for morning, boker twilight. That's the first light of the day season. And then at the very end of the day, the last dusk light of evening, when that fades away, then it becomes the night season. So first light starts at boker, and you have your full day season. And at the very end of your last dusk light, that's when you move into the night season. These 3 components of the day season include 2 twilights. Your day season has the twilight belonging to it because it has light. This light is from the sun. This is twilight. And this evening twilight, this is also light that is still from the sun, even though the sun is below the horizon. Any part of the day season that has light, or any part of the cycle, I should say, that has light coming from the sun belongs to the day season. Twilight is the period of time before sunrise and after sunset. in which the atmosphere is partially illuminated by the sun, being neither totally dark or completely lit. You can see that would be the sunrise right when it comes into pure daylight. And then sunset is on the other side. But both twilight components, they have light from the sun. Therefore, both Boker and Erev belong to the day season. They do not belong to the night season. Boker and Erev are major Torah keys for the calendar of the covenant. Always want to remember that. The scriptures hold keys. Yes, they do. Keys of knowledge in the scriptures. They're all over the place. The Torah calendar is one of these keys. But some of these keys have been removed. Removed by who? Yahusha says in Luke 11:52, "Woe unto you, lawyers, for you have taken away the key of knowledge." And I just want you to note that those words of Yahusha are long before you get to John 7 in his ministry. And what else did these leaders remove? They removed the year start after the spring teshuva, and they removed the day start at Boker twilight. They've removed a lot from this beautiful Torah calendar. But what happened in John 7? The timing is 29 Common Era, and in John 7, it's talking about the Jews' Feast of Tabernacles. It was their feast. It was not talking about the Feast of Tabernacles of the Torah. It was the Jews' Feast of Tabernacles. In John 7, verses 8 and 9, Yahusha had said to his brothers, after they had begged him to come with them up to this Jews' Feast of the Tabernacles, "You go on to the festival." Or he could have said, "You go on to their festival." I am not going to this festival. It was a lunar festival, because the right time has not come for me. He said this, and then he stayed in Galilee. Well, this is a calendar of what was happening in 29 Common Era. In March of that year, on the 22nd of March, that was the day of Teshuvah. March 22 Teshuvah, right here on the calendar. But their moon didn't show up. You can see that on the 2nd, right here, it is a dark moon. That would be right here. Generally, they count 2 days, and then they will sight their sliver moon, and that's where they will start their count for the first day of the month. That would put their Passover on the 17th on a full moon, right like that. That's a calendar from Israel right there. And what happened in that year? Their lunar year start is 13 days late. It's up here somewhere. Was there anything else that was happening? Yes, there was, because they were doing a sunset day. They were starting their day at a sunset, which 12 hours too late, because the day starts down here with the first light. So they have removed some keys from the Torah calendar. John 7 has knowledge? Really? Yes, it does. When you study John 7 out very carefully, it's probably the most important chapter in the Gospels right now for a Torah calendar. And Yahusha said to them in John 7:19, after he tried to share some things about the calendar with them, said, "Did not Moses give you the law? Yet none of you keeps the law." What would that law include? Would it include some of the worship statutes, the set apart times that they're to be keeping? I can tell you, no one was keeping the Hillel 2 calendar in the Gospels, and there was no calendar being kept from the Dead Sea Scrolls either. And there was no calendar being kept by Yahusha that had anything to do with sunset or lunar timing. We're going to look at a small sample of Julian Morgenstern's historic documentation from around the 1930s regarding the prevalent sunset lunar belief structure of Israel. And I want you to note that Morgenstern writes of sunrise rather than dawn at morning. Many times with these older studies, they will interchange sunrise for dawn. So if you can just remember that. So check and assess if you can detect where massive confusion entered the present religious teachings that we hear even today. And this is the title page of this document from Hebrew Union College. You can see that it is by Morgenstern right there. And this particular paper was 1935. And just a little note here before we read a couple of quotes from Morgenstern. He was a very, very good researcher of the Jewish calendar in the Old Testament history times and what was happening. So we can see what he has to say. And we found these references after we had figured out the calendar and what was what with Moses' covenant calendar. Certainly, history does not distort that which is written in scriptures if it's true history. It is, however, most interesting when a highly esteemed Hebrew scholar of Jewish descent, who supplies foundational material for Judaism, writing in English, agrees fully with the word of Yahuwah in this context. Let's just take a little look. A new stage in the investigation of the problem of the calendar of ancient Israel was marked by the appearance of a learned article by E. Koenig in 1906. This eminent scholar reviews carefully and in detail the hypotheses and conclusions proposed by what? Earlier scholars, and then he advances his own conclusions. He maintains that two distinct calendars were current in ancient Israel. Not one, but two. The first, it was a solar calendar. It was identical practically with that of the Phoenicians and the Canaanite predecessors of Israel in Palestine. This solar calendar was well adapted to the conditions of the simple agricultural life which the Israelites lived during the first period of their sojourn in Palestine. Do you notice that? The first period of their sojourn in Palestine. It reckoned the day from, he's saying sunrise, but actually it was dawn. They reckoned the day from dawn and the year from an appropriate date in the fall. That was for their civil calendar. It employed the old Canaanite Phoenician names of the months, and there were solar months of apparently 30 days. Isn't that interesting? 30 days, respectively. At first, the New Year's Day continued to be celebrated in the fall, originally upon the 7th month and the 10th day, but later they moved it to the 7th month and the 1st day. And eventually, however, that New Year's Day was transformed to the 1st month and the 1st day. So you can see right there is a lot of movement with their calendar, a lot of switching around. The latter system of dating and celebrating the New Year's Day, however, it did not supplant the older method of celebrating this important festival upon the 7th day of the 1st month, 7th day in the 1st month, which is Feast of Trumpets. For quite a long period, both systems seem to have existed simultaneously. Eventually, however, the later system succumbed to the older system, and ever since the New Year's Day has been observed in the Jewish calendar upon the 1st of Tishri, the 7th month. This second calendar was obviously based upon Babylonian models, and it was adopted under Babylonian influence around 600 BC, when Babylonian religion and general culture began to affect with steadily increasing force the Jewish exiles in Babylonia and through those of them who returned from exile, the Jews who had remained in Palestine. This is so true when you go through the Old Testament, the history, you can see this happening. Of course, it was Babylon. They were over there for 70 years, and they had been worshiping the sunset before they went, and they'd been doing the moon month before they went. to Babylon. But after they came back, they were indoctrinated with it through and through. The second calendar that he's talking about was now a lunar solar year. It wasn't a solar calendar, it's now loony. Now it's including the moon. This is the second calendar, and it operated with lunar months alone. And in consequence, it must have had some system of, look at this, intercalation, by which the lunar and the solar years were harmonized. These lunar months were designated at first by ordinal numbers, first month, second month, etc. But when they came back from Babylon, they came back with the Babylonian names of Nisan, etc., where they should have just been first, second, third. They should have just been numbered, not named. Let's drop down to this blue line. The day now came quite naturally to be reckoned from sunset, and the day of the full moon in each month came to play an increasingly important role in the calendar organization, so that the Passover, Matzot festival, and the Sukkot festival were transformed from their original moments of celebration to what? To the full moons of the first and the seventh months, respectively. That's what happened in the second calendar, was a completely different calendar. Now it's based on sunset, day start, and moon months. What did Yahusha say in John 7, verse 6? Yahusha therefore said to them, my time has not yet come, but your time is always ready. That word ready is G9022, etomos. It means adjustable. What was he saying? Your time, your calendar, it's always ready. It's always adjustable. And that's the way lunar calendars are today. They are continually being adjusted, always adjustable. So what was Yahuwah saying? His calendar wasn't adjustable. You just count it out. The festival calendar of the Torah covenant, it's easy. Every cycle begins at dawn twilight, that first light in the sky. Each new year and each first new month begins the day after the vernal equinox teshuva, when you see that straight line shadow and you mark it. That is the day after you see that straight line. That is the first day of the new year. That's easy. And then all 12 months have only a 30-day count, like they used to do in their first calendar. And every festival count, okay, every festival calendar, that count is 360 days. It's got nothing to do with the Roman calendar. And like we said, no intercalation is ever needed. It's such a simple calendar. But don't forget that the festival calendar should never be confused with any of these. Don't confuse it with the daily civil calendar, the Roman Gregorian calendar. That date and those counts, that's used for your daily activities. You need that calendar to exist for your appointments and your deadlines in this world today. Don't confuse covenant calendar with that. Don't confuse it with any variety of a sunset lunar calendar. And don't confuse the covenant calendar with any variety of calendars that come from the Dead Sea Scrolls. They use intercalation as well. Some witnesses along with Torah include Joshua, Yahusha definitely in the Gospels, his disciples, his apostles, and especially Paul, and that's just to name a few. They all followed the covenant calendar that Moses wrote in the Torah. The covenant calendar has the keys to be on time for all set-apart appointments. Don't be like those dinosaurs that miss the day. They weren't watching their calendar. And that's why we say, choose this day whom you will serve. Will it be the Torah, or will it be the Jews' calendar or the Dead Sea Scroll calendar? The instructions for the worship statutes, they're all in the Torah. And I'm just sure that you don't want to be late for Yahuwah's divine appointments and miss the greatest wedding of the universe. And that's it. If you need assistance to find the teachings on the covenant calendar, please email us at questions@studythecalendar.com or come and visit us. We just pray that you are blessed. Thank you for being with us today, and shalom.